Time, so we appreciate you taking the time to come in to listen to the session this afternoon. We're very excited because, as many of you probably heard earlier this morning, we got some feedback around having customer case studies. The fact is that we actually did have a good customer case study this afternoon. We do, and we're very happy to be introducing the CIO of Florida Crystal, most popularly known as Domino Sugar, Don Whittington, here to the stage. So please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you.
One of the things that I really, the chairs and myself really stressed upon in this conference was to start bringing case studies. The reality is that a lot of IT organizations are already moving down the path of cloud, just at different phases in that path. Today, Don is here to share his story of how he has taken his organization down that path, and it's a continuing process for them, and really talk about what are the factors that go into making that happen, and really from a traditional business, because let's face it, sugar doesn't become any more traditional than that. So we will go through that for the next 45 minutes, and myself and Larry Carvalho will certainly ask questions to make sure that we get a good understanding of what that path needs to look like. So Don, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your role at Florida Crystal and the kind of business that you run.
Well, I want to spend a couple of minutes. Probably Florida Crystals isn't a brand that stands out and jumps out at you. So let me describe where we're at. We own the Domino Sugar, right? So if you got it's been in the news lately with regard to the Brooklyn, Domino Sugar, which we sold off, some time ago. But also, if you're from the West Coast, we also own C&H Sugar. So we're the dominant brand in the U.S. We're a private company. So Florida Crystals is, in fact, I like to call it a private company. So we don't divulge too much. However, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. We operate in more than 10 countries. We are the world's largest refiner of raw sugar. And so so when we look at, everyone focuses on the revenue typically in these. But what I think with Florida Crystals, we're a bit of a conglomerate, and we're a very complex organization. So I want to kind of walk you through, because we're also one of the first and could be only fully integrated sugar company. So we do make sugar and sugar-containing products. We focus on sugar. We're very focused on that as our strategy. However, we own land, and in fact, we own hundreds of thousands of land, primarily to grow sugar cane. And so we have all of the land management. So when I walk through this integrated nature, I'd like you to just kind of think about the various technologies that have to occur at each step as you go along the way. So he said, all right, so you own land. Well, there's a lot just to land management, but we're also farmers. We grow cane, other crops, but primarily sugar cane. So in that aspect of our business, we have precision agriculture, right? So we're actually working on running tractors and vehicles that don't have an operator. We have thousands and thousands of pieces of gear, from GPS tractors to trucks and trailers, et cetera, that we track that. We monitor, tire wear and when to do all this. So all that's technology based. And then we take that product, the raw sugar that we grow, and we mill that into what's called raw sugar. It's not food grade at that stage. And that was our core business. When Florida Crystals, they were the provider of raw sugar. And in that, it's a very process intensive, and we had a lot of technology and automation on the process control. So we run all the automation that has to go on in running that plant. Several years ago, 1995, so if you think about, if we make raw sugar, you have land, you grow, you're a farmer, and you make raw sugar. We had one product and one customer. You sell it to the commodities market. The strategy around mid-90s was, let's go and become more value-added. Sugar is sugar, as you go out there. So that doesn't get any more basic than that. But when we said, well, let's go beyond having one product to one customer, that you are governed by commodity markets, government regulation, and the weather. right? So the only thing you can control would be the costs. We said, well, how do we take sugar and move it what we call a value-added strategy? How do we make that commodity worth more? And so we focused on value-added products. So we got into the refining business. So now we refine all of our own raw sugar, and we are one of the world's largest importers of raw sugar around the world. We source raw sugar from 40 different countries. So that takes actually the commodity management to do that, and physically moving product from 40 countries and ocean-going vessels to the dock to the et cetera. So we make things, we grow things, we make things, and we have to move things. But then ultimately, then we take that raw sugar and we refine it into food-grade product, food-grade sugar. That's the white sugar in the yellow Domino bag and the pink C&H bag that's out there. And that's what people relate to as the grocers. We're a consumer products company. We make sugar. We put it in a 5-pound bag, 2-pound bag, 1-pound bag. So that sugar, we said sugar is sugar. We have tens of thousands of SKUs of sugar. And we sell it to every channel. So if you, it would think about what now would say a consumer products company has all the consumer products things that you worry about. How do you get it to the retailer? How do you get it to the consumer, the end consumer? Who's really your customer in the consumer products company? Is it the retailer? Or is it the consumer? But we're also an ingredients company. We sell to bakers and candy makers and all kinds of industries. So we have all the same things that ingredients companies have to do. We're a food service company. We make the little sugar packets that you see out on the floor. So that happen. Let's take that as an example. So that product, we take the sugar from the land to the process, et cetera, and we put it in the small packet, put it in a 2,000-pound box. We ship that to typically a food service distributor who gets it to the restaurant, who puts it on the table, right, and gives it away. Now that's an interesting business model if you start to think about how that works. We have to have all those things that take that and add that back into the value strategy, or our value-added strategy. Then so the last one then is we go in what we call specialty products. So those that are familiar with Krispy Kreme, we make the fondant that makes Krispy Kreme's that special donut that do that. We make the large sugar crystals on grandma's molasses cookies, et cetera. And lastly, we take our size and our commodity business, and we take advantage of exports to do that. So and I really wanted to give that perspective. And again, we have several big brands. We're nearly 50% of the market in Canada. We're in Mexico, the Caribbean, and we own the Tate & Lyle sugar brand and Lyle's Golden Syrup in Europe, which Lyle's Golden Syrup is the world's oldest brand. It dates quite a ways back. So all of that just to give you a perspective of what Florida Crystals is and does, and what we try to support. So in my role as CIO, we run the business systems and the technology for the spectrum, of the business. So that's Florida Crystals.
Thank you. Fantastic background. And I think that when you start to take a look at all of the different components that go into taking sugar from the farm all the way to the end product, there's so much automation that probably happens along that supply chain. So can you start to talk to us a little bit about how you decided to really start to automate a lot of those processes and ultimately start to move away from just maintaining infrastructure and data centers and start down your path of the cloud?
Sure. I'll actually tell a little bit of a story. Back a very long time ago when I was in college, I feel like my grandfather sometimes. So I graduated from college 3 years before the IBM PC was invented. I want you to think about that. So you have to be adaptive. And that's what I thought when I was agreed to speak at this conference. They said, well, the good news is you're in the big room. You're on the last day right after lunch. I said, great. And you're on a panel. I said, that I was excited about. But the panel didn't show up. So you got me, right? So you have to adapt. You have to make the best of all of these items. So with that's really our strategy is around that. So when I went to college, the IT guys, and I think we called it data processing back then, wore lab coats, and in the lab, and you put your computers behind glass and all that. So when I started off in organic chemistry, it took me one semester that wasn't what I wanted to do, so I just took classes. I took accounting, business classes, and IT classes. I liked both. So it was a real anomaly back then to kind of get it. I had 2 degrees. I had a business degree and an IT degree. And it's really followed me throughout my career. So I'm an IT guy. I have a propensity for IT. I'm educated about it. I can speak to it. But I'm at heart a business guy. And I really believe that's what's made the difference. So if you look at the things that we're doing, and in the ability for me to describe what we do as a business, comes around the fact that I want to abstract the technology. We shouldn't have the business people be concerned about technology. We should be able to enable it. And that's what I found at Florida Crystals. I started with the company in 2001, was they really believe in the strategy around the importance of technology. It's at the core of what we do. When I looked at where do we want to take this, and I looked at the IT has really some limitations with regard to the technical obsolescence, which is a cause and effect related to the technology. So all of the advances, when you go out on the show floor, and all of those things related to the guy that then has to run it. Do you throw away what you used to do, or do you leverage it, et cetera? So what I found then how we ended up in the cloud was we said if we took an approach with to say we would go and take the technology and go to a co-location. We started with a co-location, went to an ASP model, and we just went through it. So in 2010 is when we linked up with VirtuStream, and that was 4 years ago that we went live. We connected before that, and that was when the cloud was not what it is today. I really want you, this group particularly, go back 4 years ago, and we decided, working with VirtuStream, and what was going to be, and I'm running, by the way, we were primarily an SAP. Mm-hmm. I hate the term, but we're an SAP shop. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And we're not a development shop. That's really important to understand, is we don't write, I don't have developers. Right, so for those that know what SAP is, and the programming language is called ABAP, or to do that, I have one on my staff, one. Because what I find, if you have more than that, they'll write ABAP, right? And so we really basically said we're not a development shop. We want to use it, and that's been incredibly liberating. So when the cloud came up, and liberation is important here. When the cloud thing came up, what I saw in that was if I could hand the technical obsolescence and all this other stuff to a provider, a cloud provider, that's the value I had. Now, the technology behind that's important. I've had discussions with VirtuStream on what they're doing and why they're doing it. I like to feel I was key in helping them build the business that they've built today. But most importantly, we moved the entire data center. I have not had a data center for 4 years.
Not one. Not one.
They're gone. I moved to the cloud.
So, Don, yesterday we had a panel discussion, and we asked them to tell us when 80% companies will on average move 80% to private or public clouds, and they said 2022.
Right.
So you were 12 years ahead of them. You were 100%.
Well, thank goodness for that. I might not even live to be the 2022. So it is.
Another interesting fact is that we heard some time ago is someone said, actually the CEO of Infor, which was our keynote session this morning, friends don't let friends build data centers.
Right. I did not hear that, but I love it. Well, I have a corollary to that. I will use that, by the way. I don't know if I need permission. I'm not sure if he copyrighted that. But it's absolutely true. So and I run into my peers. Again, back then I was called, that I wasn't very smart, to the point that you're just naive. And I said, well, we'll see. Right. So I feel vindicated, 4 years later. And I think that the intimidation 4 years ago was I believe CIOs that believe their job is to run the data center are intimidated by the cloud. I believe those CIOs that believe their job is to enable business profitability, et cetera, would be liberated by the cloud. Let me talk about that, because I can show where I believe that we're liberated. In a world now with 4 years later, 4 years ago I spoke that I could do the things that I can now say we've done. So 4 years later, imagine the CIO who has no CapEx. I no longer have to go to the board and say, I need X millions of dollars to buy hardware to replace the hardware we bought 3 years ago, that the business value that you would get from buying that hardware is nothing. IT is like a roof in that environment. I don't do any of that anymore. Not only that, back when I had to do that, I didn't like to do that. It didn't make sense, so you had to overbuy. You had to buy enough capacity for 3 to 5 years. And you had to buy at the peak. You had to buy your peak. We're a seasonal business. And the holidays occur, September to December. There's a lot more sugar sold around the holidays. But I had to always have that hardware and the CapEx to run at that peak. And now I have, with the VirtuStream, we run a multi-tenant private cloud and on an enterprise level. And I want to talk about that next. When we talk about what I have to run SAP. Right, and SAP is a lot different than any ERP, but we run SAP is a lot different than other things that you might run in the cloud. A web app, but that don't mean that because sometimes we get into these debates. There's nothing disparaging. It's just factual, right? It is quite different. And so now though, if I can go and turn that on and off as a utility, which is what I'm able to do. It's been incredibly liberating, number one. But number two, the incredible business value. Some of the things that we've been able to do with mergers and acquisitions, we have grown tremendously over the... and had I known it wasn't a panel, I'd have had some very impressive slides that I would have shared. And it would have showed the incredible growth that we've been able to enable. And the difference is when I'm doing that, we viewed IT as helping the M&A. Not the IT, well, we got to get with the IT and see how they're going to integrate this. We were part of that team. So IT has become really part of the business. We don't align with the business. We're part of the business. And it's really, for me, it's been the most rewarding in the 13 years, right, is to be the CIO that's part of the business and not having to align and make those things happen. So when we first went to the cloud, then when we moved this thing to the VirtuStream cloud, we had to be able to handle workloads that were quite different. SLAs based on response times around the world. SAP response times, in addition to overcoming, well, what about the network? What about this? What about all the components that make up that SLA that's there? In what I get would be in stateful high I/O apps. This is things that, again, we're making things, moving things that all have to occur in real time. And so we had to go through the security concerns. There's obviously things you need to make sure. You need to make sure you've got the right provider, right, that's going to have the SLA and to make sure that happens. And I take a different view even with SLAs. The punitive SLAs, I think, are a bit, to where you say, well, if you have this downtime, it costs you this amount of money. Right? Our SLAs say if this doesn't occur, we're going to get together and figure out how to make this thing happen. I want a call to arms, not a credit, right? To make those things happen, and it's been a great relationship. So what we did when we got rid of that data center, it let us focus on the important pieces to the business, some innovation. What was surprising then is the other thing with VirtuStream that we went through was they manage our SAP as well. So I wasn't looking for infrastructure. I was looking for an SAP solution, and that was the discussion. And I like to think that it was the magic or the secret sauce, I think we called it, when that first started up. Is we're not going to offer an infrastructure; they're going to offer a solution. So I have no SAP basis systems management types. That's all done by VirtuStream. My SAP systems engineering, they call basis, that's there consists of one person who manages the relationship, and all the rest of that happens happens behind, with VirtuStream. So let's go back and talk about the fact that I don't have CapEx and I don't have to pre-buy this material. But the real value add ends up being, since they manage the whole solution, I don't have to worry about technical obsolescence at all. And when I get into some of these cloud pieces, they might want to spar, with regard to what are they running? Are they running KVM or VMware, Hyper? I said, I don't even know. It doesn't matter to me, right? It matters to somebody. I know it does because we get into some of the discussion about that. But for me, it doesn't matter. And it's so liberating. So they come out with a new storage capabilities or new technologies. I just look to my provider to say, I'm assuming you're using that. The best example I have is a year ago, right now, we became the first SAP customer in the world to run an entire ERP stack on their new HANA in-memory computing in the VirtuStream cloud, the first in the world, right? And I just said, that's what we want to do. That's what we got to make this happen. It's going to add value to the business. And the value to the business, by the way, and it's in-memory computing, is our vision is such that we want to have SAP. I use the vision aspect of that to be, I want to run SAP as fast as Excel in memory and as easy to use. And I'm working with some of the top SAP executives on doing exactly that, working the VirtuStream cloud to do that. If I had to be worried about what type of gear has to run on that and what's the best hypervisor, and is it going to run an OpenStack, and is it going to do that? You can spend a lifetime. Some of you might be spending a lifetime doing exactly that, but that's not what I do. And so that, if you look at, I don't have the CapEx, I don't have the management of the system, and I don't have to manage that technical obsolescence, we're intensely focused on the business. So what was interesting about that, it was that we found that running the VirtuStream cloud, which I'll call it the enterprise cloud, has enabled us to look at other cloud applications, so varying degrees. Some would argue that in multi-tenant private cloud isn't a real cloud. It's a private cloud. Mm-hmm. But what I can say is the solution we've got in place to do that, we are now running actually software as a service type cloud on sales and operations planning from SAP on SAP's cloud, software as a service. And we're the same thing with CRM. And we're running cloud-based software loosely, I'll call it, because that's what they call it, with ADP and timekeeping, et cetera. So we're running all these clouds, all managed through, again, the VirtuStream, bringing that together. Cloud, we coined it cloud management, that we do that. And all of that comes, because it all has to work. I'm not a development shop, so I don't do those pieces. I have the solution provider to do that. I think that's the future. When people say, when are you going to be there to 2022 or et cetera, you have to worry about all those things. But we actually, working with VirtuStream, built some of that, made that happen, and it's there today, right? And that's why I wanted to share some of the scale that we talked about that earlier. So all of that to say that we end up getting the business value, right, by being able to integrate companies faster, right? And then we can run the business applications, whether it's precision ag, et cetera, whenever the business wants to do it. We don't have a huge lag in time to make those things that add value or provide a strategic advantage. They come relatively quickly. And so that's what makes the difference, I believe, in the business focus versus the technology focus.
So Don, you mentioned there is no developers and things like that. What about administrators or anything like that? And the other question is also non-SAP, things like email and all those. Right. What do you do with those kinds of things? Because you talked a lot about SAP, and I like that. Yeah. So just quickly on that.
That'd be great. That's a great question, the business, I could actually, some people would say, we argued this point, what does the business run on SAP? We said, well, actually, it runs on email. I mean, the transactions occur in SAP. So when we moved the data center, we moved all enterprise. So we right now have in the VirtuStream cloud, we've got Exchange, right? So Exchange runs that. We administer portions of that. So I would say they provide the Exchange, and we manage it administer it from that point up. But we're moving to Open 365.
Okay.
Right. So that's already planned. It's underway. We did a new enterprise agreement with Microsoft. We're making that happen. And but it's all there. All of our enterprise fax servers, mail servers, et cetera, are all housed within the cloud. So it's a bit of a data center in the cloud is the way that we would that we look at it.
And what about things like security and all that? Is that also?
That's always a concern, and 4 years ago it was a bigger concern. In our case, we look for certifications and compliance type of things that we do. So and we're a private company, so security is important more as a business strategy than a regulation, right? There's other industries that are more regulated; they have to do it. But when you're a private or a family-owned business, there's privacy is of a main concern. So if you look at whatever your cloud provider is, you have to look at their security strategy, right? The security certifications, and then the compliance with regard to are they following the strategy. I believe, and there are many that disagree, but I believe that if you've got the right provider, they will have people whose entire career is based on being secure. And that I don't know that a single entity, any business, can have the degree of security, expertise, quality, et cetera, that you could get from a provider that would do looking at the security across industries, technologies, et cetera. And I really believe that in my heart of heart, that I believe they can do it better than I could do it.
Absolutely. And I wanted to piggyback a little bit on Larry's question in terms of looking at the bigger picture. You've been down this journey now for 4 years. I'm sure it was a big obstacle to introduce this kind of approach to your business and have them trust you with it. What are some of the things that you went through in overcoming these challenges within your IT organization? So some of the administrators, network admins, sysadmins, as well as bringing in other components of the business to sort of, because it's a top-down decision, right? You have to have everyone on board. What were some of those challenges?
Yeah, you're right. It was top-down, but it's also bottoms-up. I mean, that's the challenge, and it was, so for me, it was 4 years ago. So some of it I'd rather just forget. But it really was a fairly easy sell because we had went down a path. Remember, we co-located and we went to an ASP. So it was semi-gradual over a few years. But on the business side, in the boardroom, it was one is this whole idea that we're part of the business made it easier than CIOs that either aren't aligned or even aligned with the business, because you're justifying that. So we kind of viewed this as, this makes sense from a business perspective. One of the biggest challenges back in 2010, and I think it remains today, is trying to define to a group board level executives of what the cloud is. Right? And, I mean, in 2010, they would say, well, what if it's like extra cloudy? Right? What if the cloud produces rain? I mean, they really would go through it. I said, well, if it does, we'll mop it up, and we're with more cloud the better, right? To do that. But in the end, it was all a business sell. I can summarize it into, one, we've got a trusted provider. That'd be number one. Number two, we're going to reduce our infrastructure total cost of ownership by 25%.
Wow.
So
that's enough to sell it.
Well, that's what it was. So we said that's what it's going to be. We missed the 25 because we got 30, right? So I probably sandbagged a bit, right? So, but anyway, we said 25. We got 30, and then off we went. And some of these things that I mentioned throughout the day was the stuff that really added and the business value to where we do things that when they talk to their peers, right? Let alone I talk to my peers. Is they'll say, oh, I can't believe we can't integrate, the IT doesn't do this, or the IT group is the constraint. And my boss said, I just tell them, no, we don't have that problem. So that's the biggest compliment that you can get.
So one question that is great when you have this 25-30%, but a lot of people want to move to a cloud platform and to leverage somebody like a VirtuStream, or a company who will do it for you for business agility. So have you seen in the last 4 years after we have moved that you have been able to reduce the workload that has come in, or the application requests or any requests that come from the business to IT using this new approach, and you gained also a capability of responding to your business faster with the new approach?
Absolutely, and I can give a couple of very specific examples. We were in or are in a period of a good bit of M&A activity, and so one of the we have a methodology that we developed when we integrate companies. Our board believes that the right way to integrate a business is to standardize, not on technology, but on the business. If we've got a model that works, then we take the business processes and the management, so that we would go in and provide a degree of focus on the business that we're acquiring, and some management of that. And the management comes from the business processes. So we developed, in accordance with that business requirement, we developed a methodology with a 3-phase on M&A. One we coined a technical. I like to reduce things to simple terms. We have a technology transfer. We got to take it from the seller, whatever it is, and transfer that to us in its current state, whatever that is. Then the second piece is that alignment. That's all right, do these standardizations, followed by optimization, following that. One of the challenges we had pre-cloud was if we were to buy, typically when we bought businesses, we would buy a piece of a business, right? So you don't get their assets. You have to extract those assets, information assets, and put them in another infrastructure. And before we were in the cloud years ago, it was, how do you do that? You're trying to do it over a weekend. You just run into the amount of time that it takes to get the data transferred, et cetera. So we were actually chartering jets, right? So you'd get the physical media. Back in the day when you carried around briefcases full of plastic-cased magnetic tape and discs and things, and we would charter jets to get it there. What we found it in 2010 when we first went to the cloud. What we can do is we take now the seller system and we say, well, look, why don't you take a copy of your instance, your system, whatever it is, to do that with your data, put it in a secure section of VirtuStream's cloud. So when we did that, we said they put that there, and they can validate the security, and it's their own, right? Their own piece of that. They then purge off the data that we don't get, because that's typically what you have to do. You put everything in there, purge off what we don't get. They validate that, and then instead of, all right, so now take that data, stream it to some form of media, get it on some form of transportation to get it to here, to load it up and get that loaded, we now take it from that cloud environment, flip it over. It literally takes minutes instead of we saved up to 72 hours, right, to do that. And that has transformed the way that we do business. The executives don't understand what it is, but they do know that it takes basically, we've integrated very large companies and multiple companies, literally, in the matter of a long weekend. Typically, it's 3 p.m. on Friday Eastern time, and we're available on the following Monday. So the M&A has become much simpler and much faster. And again, but the business value is that we didn't have to disrupt the operation, either operation, the seller or the business that we were bringing on. So that was on the M&A side, we had that. The other one that was really important was they would say, we would like to try this, whatever it would be. We just want to try this. So you've got to go over and you need 3 servers and one of these and one of those, so you need some capital request to do that. And if it doesn't work, then what do you do with that equipment that you bought? So now I can literally, and this goes to what you said about administration of the system. So now you go to a portal, You spin up whatever you need. It could be a web app. It could be SAP. You literally push the button, spin the thing up, and then we've got to do the normal hokey pokey stuff to make the application work. And then when that occurs, they like it. We said, good. We keep going. You don't like it, you shut it down. And the only thing you pay for is that period of time that thing actually ran.
So you try out a lot of stuff as you...
So we try it. You try it before you buy it. Now think about that from the IT guys that say, once you buy it, you own it. Perpetually. Whether you ever use it or not. Right? So, I mean, it's incredible, right?
So one of the things that has been a challenge for cloud is being able to move those core business applications, right? You started with SAP, but most people are very nervous or hesitant to do that. Or Exchange, is you tend to move those less mission critical applications, yet you took an opposite approach to that. And so I'd like to get your thinking process around what made you decide to just go straight with SAP, and which at the end of the day is probably one of the more difficult things to maintain on your own, so understandable, but what was the thought process around?
It's a complex problem for the migration, from on-premise type to the cloud, because it is so holistic, right? When you have to move the ERP type of applications in the States, right? Now, I mean, you can't move a piece of that. You got to move that, and then you look into, well, does that include just the productive instances, or do you look at your development and quality boxes, et cetera? And so for us, we actually did, during this process of moving, we moved the non-productive instances first and tried that. But we didn't spend a lot of time doing it. We spent, we literally, when we started and we got to move our data center to where we were, including the testing to we were done, was just about 90 days. Right, to do that. So we moved the non-productive, and we had that working, and then we would move the productive pieces. Now, what's really interesting now is it's the technologies 4 years ago, because we were trying to stream and synchronize data, et cetera. The technologies, for maybe some of the people in this room, have made that so much easier than when we were. It was fairly new to be able to try to synchronize that data over a WAN and to make it and cut that off and quiesce it and get all that stuff lined up, which is a lot of the stuff that VirtuStream and other people have built make that whole migration process easier. But I think you've got to approach it. My recommendation would be you've got to kind of buy in. Those that want to test to see if we want to do this are really the disadvantage for this. Say we're going to get there and do whatever it takes to get there, right? So in other words, we're going to say that's where we're going to be. It might take me a week, it might take me 10 years, but that's where we're going to go, and then build that plan. The ones that take this, well, let's try it and see, and then we'll evaluate whether we want to go there, I think is that where you get that constant back and forth, because there are things that are going to get in the way. I can't predict them, right? But there are things that are going to be challenging. So
one of the things, you talked a lot about M&A, and that's great on what it did to improve it, but is technology as important in your company that they bring IT to say, hey, we should when we buy this company, what effort are we going to take to migrate them, or has that become, a non-issue, or how do you think about that?
Well, it's really, so one, they view my role, which would be traditionally IT, but some would say my role hasn't been IT in the end, but they would approach me. And what's really, so the technology, let's use another example of we've got CRM, a cloud-based CRM. It happens to be SAP's CRM, but it is, and we run traditional CRM as well, because it does some trade promotion management and some other items. But they wanted this ability to do opportunity management, et cetera. And they came to me saying, we really want to enable our sales force beyond the limit with some of this new cloud-based, their words, this cloud, CRM pieces of it. So they approached me. I wasn't telling them they should be doing it. So we did a pilot. We did a pilot in Europe, and we had a small business team and a very small number of IT folks. We let the business folks lead it. and it was so successful, they're lined up now. They're running it, right? So I think, and then what I try to do is enable them versus them to ask us to do it. And it's kind of like the, pump your own gasoline, right? It's kind of a win-win once you get everybody to understand that or ATMs, et cetera. Because at first you get into that, wasn't that your job? I said, well, it can be. I said, but I have to have IT guys that know everything about the business versus having business people, in this case, who just have to know about how to run the cloud stuff in CRM. The other thing it's done then is we had upgrades, and CRM was an instance. In a legacy CRM, we keep up with upgrades. So that's one of the things. Not a development shop means we're current on almost everything, right? Microsoft or ERP, et cetera. We believe in keeping up because we don't develop software, so we want to make sure we're using the latest and greatest. So, but what's really happened, the other thing in the cloud has made upgrades less worrisome. I used to have to, just like CapEx, I would have to go and say, well, we have a project, right? We need to upgrade, pick whatever it is. So we need to upgrade our ERP system. And we need 6 months. We're not going to be able to do anything else. We're going to have to focus on this. We need people from the business to develop in this. I need a couple $1 million to do that. And once we spend a few $1 million, 6 months, missed opportunities on doing that, with any luck, if it's perfectly successful, it'll be just like it was before we started. I mean, only IT people can come up with that kind of stuff. So now the CRM stuff, they say, you get an email over the weekend, we're going to upgrade and to the newest release. It's not us, it's the cloud, which is also very liberating. The cloud did it, and they go back and make it happen. So it's a bit. I'm not that Pollyannish, right? But that is how it's viewed. And if we were doing an upgrade and it messed up, we're awful people, right? If there's something over the weekend, hiccups and whatever, they seem to be much more tolerant of the cloud. It must be the amorphous identity, right? They can't put a face on it. So it really has been a real business. So it becomes the business asking for these. It's the same thing with sales and operations planning in the cloud. That came from our vice president of supply chain. He said, well, why can't we do this? I said, well, we can. And it went off. So I'm not driving some of that. The business is driving it.
Right. So in the last few minutes, in your opinion, what would be some of the recommendations in getting started? I know you've been down this path for some time now. A lot of the audience is either getting started or somewhat down that path. What would you say is sort of the first 2 or 3 steps that need to happen?
Again, I think what you need to determine if you want to be intimidated or liberated, yes. Right? So if you want to be liberated and move to the cloud, I think you have to choose what is it that you're after, right? So I really believe that's the case. If you want a lower cost of ownership, more agile, I gave several examples to do that. It's possible. We're doing it. Right, to do it. And I believe then, so that's number one is, I call it, you've got to get your head right, of whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. And you have to sell that aspect of it, right, to your business, to your team, right, as to this is going to be good for folks. I think the next piece is to really look at the provider. The provider is going to be, and that's why you need to know what you want to do. For me, I was looking for a solution. I wasn't looking for infrastructure. So are you looking for infrastructure as a service? Are you looking for a platform? I was looking for a solution. I want someone else to do that for me. I want to eliminate my data center and have that abstract the technical obsolescence. If you're not that extreme yet, right, then I think you've got to say, well, what are you looking for? Find the right provider, right, and that takes time, right? I believe that throughout my career, then I've found that what matters most are relationships. It's always about the people, right? So you should get to know your provider. And I actually had a contract, a telecom contract, where in the contract it said that if I changed the account team, I could cancel the contract with 30 days notice, right? Because it was important. That's what it mattered, because you go to the people to make that stuff happen. And I think that's what you want to do. That's what we found in VirtuStream. I've said it a number of times, but could not have done it without them, and we did it together. I think that's really important. And then the last item is measure what you're trying to find. So if it's TCO and it's 25%, say it's 20, and then when you do 25, you be a hero, right? Or whatever it is that you're really after. And I think if you do those things, so if you go, what are you trying to do? How are you going to get there? How are you going to measure it? It's a pretty easy formula. Right.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's a fantastic story. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. Feel free to talk to Don for any questions. He'll be milling around the show floor. Again, Don Whittington from Florida Crystals, Domino Sugar. Thank you.
No, thank you.